You open your eyes in the morning, and the first thing you feel is not gratitude for another day, not curiosity about what awaits you, but a deep, nameless heaviness that presses down on your chest like a stone. It is not physical exhaustion, though your body feels leaden. It is not depression in the clinical sense, though the flatness of everything around you resembles that void. It is something older, something that lives beneath words, beneath diagnoses, beneath the reach of any quick remedy. You wake into a world that feels gray even when the sun is shining. The people around you move with purpose, with energy, with plans and desires, and you watch them as if through thick glass, unable to remember what it felt like to care about anything the way they seem to care. Your responsibilities still exist, your routines continue, but you perform them like an actor who has forgotten why the play matters. You eat without tasting, you speak without meaning, you smile without feeling, and beneath all of it, a silent scream echoes in the chambers of your soul. A scream that asks the question you're too afraid to speak aloud. Is this all there is? Is this living? Or is this something else entirely? You're not merely tired. You're tired of being tired. You're tired of pretending that everything is fine when nothing feels right. You're tired of the endless cycle of waking, performing, sleeping, and waking again into the same emptiness. You have tried to fix it. You have changed your diet, your sleep schedule, your environment. You have sought distraction in entertainment, in work, in relationships. But nothing touches the core of what ails you, because what you are experiencing is not a problem of circumstances. It is a crisis of the soul. And if you have felt this, if these words are landing in your chest like stones thrown into a dark well, then listen carefully to what I am about to tell you, because Dostoevsky understood this condition better than almost anyone who has ever lived, and what he discovered about it will either terrify you or set you free. You are not broken because you feel this way. You are not weak because you wake each morning with a heaviness that others seem not to carry. You are not failing at life because the world has lost its color and meaning. What you are experiencing is something that Dostoevsky saw again and again in the depths of the human soul, something he described with such precision in his greatest works that reading them can feel like having your own hidden thoughts exposed to light. You are not alone in this. Throughout history, there have always been those who reach a point where the surface of life becomes transparent, where they can no longer pretend that the routines and rituals that satisfy others are enough. These are not damaged people. These are people who have touched something true about existence, something that most spend their entire lives running from. Dostoevsky himself knew this exhaustion intimately. He knew what it meant to wake into a world that felt like a prison, to look at the faces of others and feel an unbridgeable distance, to carry within himself a weight that no one else could see or understand. And he knew that this condition was not a flaw in character, but a stage in the soul's development, a dark passage that some must walk through on their way to becoming fully human. So when you feel this tiredness that goes deeper than your bones, when you look at your life and feel nothing but a quiet despair, you're not losing your mind. You're being called to something. The soul is speaking to you in the only language it has left when all other forms of communication have failed. What you call exhaustion, what you call emptiness, what you call this terrible flatness of experience, Dostoevsky would call the death of the false self. He understood that before any true transformation can occur, something must die. Not your body, not your mind, but the version of yourself that you constructed to survive in a world that demands performance over authenticity, achievement over truth, comfort over growth. This death is not metaphorical, it is real. It is happening inside you right now. The self that could find satisfaction in shallow pleasures is dying. The self that could ignore the deeper questions of existence is dying. The self that could participate in the collective illusion that life is primarily about success, security, and the accumulation of experiences is dying. And like all deaths, this one is painful. It is disorienting. It makes you feel as if you are disappearing, as if the ground beneath you is giving way. But Dostoevsky knew something that modern culture has forgotten. This death is necessary. In his novels, he returned again and again to characters who experienced this same crisis. Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, who committed murder trying to prove he was beyond ordinary moral law, only to discover that his very soul was killing him from within. The underground man who retreated into bitterness and isolation because he could no longer bear the hypocrisy of civilized society. Prince Michkin in The Idiot, whose purity and honesty were too much for a world built on deception. These characters were not meant to be tragic figures, to be pitied. They were prophets of the soul's journey, showing us that the path to authentic existence always runs through a kind of death. When you wake tired of life, what is dying inside you is everything that is not truly you. Every mask you have worn, every role you have played, every compromise you have made to fit into a world that never quite made sense to you. This dying is the soul's way of clearing space for something new, something truer, something that can only emerge when the false structures have collapsed. Dostoevsky observed that this spiritual death unfolds in stages, each one stripping away another layer of illusion until you are left standing naked before the truth of your own existence. The first stage is the death of pleasure. You notice that the things that once brought you joy no longer touch you. Food loses its taste. Music becomes noise. Conversations feel hollow. Even your greatest passions, the activities that once defined you, suddenly seem pointless. This is not depression in the medical sense, though it resembles it. This is the soul withdrawing its energy from anything that is not genuine, anything that is merely a distraction from deeper questions. Dostoevsky wrote about this through his characters' experiences of profound disillusionment, where they could no longer lose themselves in the ordinary pleasures that kept others content. They had seen through the game, and once you see through a game, you cannot pretend to play it with enthusiasm. The second stage is the death of meaning. The structures that once gave your life purpose begin to crumble. Your career, which you thought defined you, suddenly feels like a series of empty motions. Your relationships, which you thought sustained you, reveal themselves as performances where no one is truly seen. The beliefs you held about who you are and why you are here start to dissolve, leaving you in a terrible void where nothing seems to matter anymore. This is the most dangerous stage, because it is here that many people panic and try to run back to the old structures, even though those structures can no longer hold them. Dostoevsky understood that you cannot return to innocence once you have lost it. You cannot unknow what you have come to know. The only way out is through. The third stage is the death of identity itself. This is when you begin to realize that even your sense of self, the I that you have always assumed was solid and real, is also a construction. You look in the mirror and see a stranger. You listen to yourself speak and wonder who is speaking. You move through your days feeling like a ghost in your own life. This is what Dostoevsky called the dissolution of personality, and it is perhaps the most terrifying experience a human being can have, because it feels like madness, like the complete loss of everything that anchors you to reality. But he knew that this dissolution was not madness. It was the soul finally breaking free from the prison of a fixed identity, from the desperate need to be someone, to be recognized, to have a stable sense of self that the world can acknowledge and approve. The fourth stage, which few reach without turning back in fear, is what Dostoevsky called the encounter with nothingness. This is when you have been stripped of pleasure, meaning, and identity, and you find yourself standing in a vast emptiness where there is nothing to hold on to, nothing to believe in, nothing to orient yourself by. Everything you thought was solid has revealed itself to be smoke. Everything you thought mattered has shown itself to be arbitrary. You are alone in a way that most people never experience, alone with the raw fact of your own existence, with no story to comfort you, no role to hide behind, no future to hope for that would make the present bearable. This is the moment that breaks most people, the moment where they either retreat into some new form of distraction or where they take their own life because they cannot bear the weight of pure existence without meaning. But Dostoevsky discovered something extraordinary about this moment. He discovered that if you can stay in this nothingness, if you can resist the urge to flee or to fill the void with some new illusion, something begins to shift. The nothingness itself begins to speak. In his own life, Dostoevsky faced this abyss multiple times. As a young man, he was sentenced to death for his involvement in a political group, taken to the execution ground, and given his last rites before being pardoned at the last possible moment. In that experience, he touched the absolute edge of existence, the place where life and death meet, and it changed him forever. Later, he spent years in a Siberian labor camp, surrounded by violence and degradation, stripped of everything that had defined him as an educated, cultured man. And throughout his life, he struggled with epilepsy, with gambling addiction, with poverty and loss. These experiences taught him something that he wove into every one of his great novels, that the human soul is capable of enduring far more than we imagine, and that it is precisely in the moments of greatest suffering, greatest emptiness, greatest despair that we come closest to touching what is real. He wrote, "Pain and suffering are always inevitable for a large intelligence and a deep heart." He was not glorifying suffering. He was recognizing that those who feel deeply, who think profoundly, who refuse to numb themselves to the truth of existence, will inevitably encounter this pain. And he was saying that this pain is not a mistake. It is a doorway. When you wake tired of life, when your soul feels like it is dying in silence, you are standing at this doorway. On one side is the world of surfaces, of distractions, of comfortable lies. On the other side is something you cannot yet see, something that terrifies you because it requires you to let go of everything you have clung to for safety. Dostoevsky knew that most people will do anything to avoid walking through this doorway. They will medicate themselves with work, with relationships, with substances, with endless consumption and entertainment. They will construct elaborate philosophies to explain away the emptiness. They will join movements and causes that give them a sense of purpose without requiring them to confront their own nothingness. But for those who cannot or will not turn back, for those who find themselves pinned in this terrible space between death and rebirth, there is another way. Dostoevsky did not offer easy solutions because he knew there are none. He did not prescribe meditation practices or positive thinking or any of the shallow remedies that modern culture offers for spiritual crisis. Instead, he pointed toward a path that requires everything from you, a path that most will reject because it asks too much. The first requirement is absolute honesty. You must stop lying to yourself about what you feel and what you know. You must stop pretending that you are fine when you are not fine. You must stop performing happiness, optimism, or engagement when your soul is screaming that none of it is real. Dostoevsky believed that the root of all spiritual sickness is dishonesty, the refusal to acknowledge what is true. His characters, who found redemption, like Raskolnikov, did so only when they finally stopped running from their own truth and confessed, not to others primarily, but to themselves. You must sit with the heaviness you feel and admit that it is there. You must look at your life and acknowledge where it has become false, where you are going through motions, where you are betraying your own soul for the sake of comfort or approval. This honesty is excruciating because it strips away your last defenses, but it is also liberating because it ends the exhausting work of pretense. The second requirement is to embrace the suffering rather than trying to escape it. This is perhaps the most difficult thing Dostoevsky asks of us, because our every instinct tells us to avoid pain, to seek relief, to make the uncomfortable feeling go away. But he understood that this particular kind of suffering is not an obstacle to be removed. It is a crucible in which the soul is being refined. In Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov's suffering after the murder does not diminish when he tries to rationalize it away, or when he attempts to prove he was justified. It only begins to transform when he accepts it fully, when he stops fighting it and allows it to break him open. The same is true for you. The tiredness you feel, the sense that your soul is dying, will not be healed by trying to make it go away. It will only shift when you stop resisting it and allow yourself to fully experience what it is showing you. This does not mean wallowing in despair. It means being present to the truth of your condition without trying to fix it, explain it away, or numb it. The third requirement is solitude, not isolation born of fear or bitterness, but chosen solitude where you can hear the voice of your own soul without the interference of the world's demands. Dostoevsky's characters often retreated into underground spaces, into silence, into the depths of their own consciousness. The underground man spent years in his room, torturing himself with thoughts that others never allowed themselves to think. Prince Michkin despite his connection to others, remained fundamentally alone in his purity. This solitude is necessary because the transformation you are undergoing cannot happen in the noise and distraction of constant social performance. You must create space to let the false self die completely, to let the old meanings collapse, to sit in the nothingness until something new emerges from it. But there is a fourth requirement that Dostoevsky emphasized above all others, and it is this: you must have the courage to wait. Transformation of the soul does not happen on your timetable. It does not respond to your wishes or your desperate need for relief. It unfolds according to its own mysterious rhythm, and you cannot force it or control it. You can only prepare the ground and then wait with as much patience and faith as you can muster. This waiting is not passive. It is an active vigilance, a staying present to whatever arises without judgment, without trying to make it into something else. Dostoevsky's characters who found grace found it only after long periods of suffering where nothing seemed to change, where hope had been abandoned, where they had given up trying to save themselves. And then, in a moment they could not have predicted or earned, something shifted. A shaft of light broke through. A new possibility opened, not because they had figured out the answer, but because they had finally stopped demanding one. You are in this waiting period now. Your soul is dying in silence. Yes, but death is not the end of the story. It is the middle. Dostoevsky knew that the soul must die to its old form before it can be reborn into a new one. The caterpillar must dissolve completely in the cocoon before it can become a butterfly. The seed must be buried in darkness before it can grow toward light. Your exhaustion, your emptiness, your sense of meaninglessness, these are the signs that the old form is dissolving. The new form has not yet appeared, and you cannot make it appear through effort or will. You can only trust that something is happening beneath the surface of your awareness, something that will reveal itself when the time is right. There will come a morning, though you cannot know when you wake and feel something different, not the old enthusiasm, not the return of the pleasures that once satisfied you, but something quieter and more solid, a sense of groundedness that does not depend on circumstances, a capacity to be present to life without needing it to be anything other than what it is, a strange peace that exists alongside the suffering rather than replacing it. This is what Dostoevsky called resurrection, not in a religious sense necessarily, though he was a believer, but in a psychological and spiritual sense. The self that died was the false self, the constructed identity, the mask you wore to navigate a world that demanded you be someone other than who you truly are. What is being born, slowly and painfully, is your authentic being, the part of you that has always been there beneath the roles and performances and desperate strivings. This authentic self does not need the world to be different than it is. It does not require constant stimulation or achievement or validation from others. It can bear the weight of existence because it is no longer carrying the additional weight of pretense. And paradoxically, once you stop demanding that life give you pleasure or meaning or purpose, you begin to discover that these things are present in the bare fact of being alive, in the simple miracle of consciousness, in the profound mystery of existing at all. Dostoevsky wrote, "The mystery of human existence lies not in just staying alive, but in finding something to live for. What he meant was that most people never find this because they are too busy chasing after ready-made meanings that the culture offers them. But when you go through this death of the soul, when all those ready-made meanings collapse and you're left with nothing, you're finally in a position to discover what is authentically worth living for. Not what others tell you matters, not what you think you should care about, but what actually calls to your soul when everything else has been stripped away. If you are reading these words and recognizing yourself in them, if you have been waking tired of life and feeling your soul dying in silence, then you are not at the end of your story. You are in the most important chapter, the chapter where everything false is being burned away so that what is true can finally emerge. This is not a comfortable process. Dostoevsky never promised comfort. He promised truth, and he promised that if you can bear the truth, if you can stay present to this death without fleeing into distraction or despair, you will eventually pass through to the other side, not unchanged, not returned to your old self, but transformed into something deeper, more real, more capable of genuine love and genuine presence than you have ever been before. You are not broken. You are breaking open. You are not losing your life. You are losing your attachment to a false version of life. You are not dying. You are being born slowly and painfully into your true existence. And though it feels unbearable now, though you wake each morning with that terrible heaviness, Dostoevsky would tell you that this heaviness is temporary, but what you are becoming is eternal. The soul does not die easily. It fights for its truth, and your exhaustion is the sound of that fight, the labor pains of a new self struggling to be born. So, if this message has reached you, if any part of it has touched the place in you that knows it is true, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments what resonates most deeply with your experience. Are you in the stage of losing pleasure, of losing meaning, of losing yourself entirely? Share your story, because your words might be the lifeline that someone else desperately needs to hear today. And if you want to continue exploring these depths with me, if you want to keep walking through this darkness toward whatever light awaits on the other side, subscribe to this channel for more reflections on the soul's journey through suffering toward truth. Remember that you're not walking this path alone, even when it feels lonelier than anything you have ever known. Dostoevsky walked it before you. I am walking it with you. And somewhere in the silence of your exhausted soul, something is already beginning to stir. Something that knows the way forward, even when your conscious mind cannot see it yet. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having the courage to face this darkness rather than running from it. Your willingness to stay present to your own transformation is the most honest and beautiful thing a human being can do. I will see you in the next reflection.